Welcome to the Night Temple, a weekly podcast about art, memory, and inspiration.
Welcome to the Night Temple. This is a podcast hosted by myself and Andrew of Night Tongue, and we're tapping into discover what inspires some of the amazing artists that we're friends with and love. So today we have with us Harley Cortez, who is like an incredible visual artist, musician, filmmaker, and he is our first guest. And welcome to you all, because this is our first podcast of the Night Temple.
All right. Yeah.
All right.
Quite the pressure now.
Yeah.
I'm the first. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for
Thanks for
being
here.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well, I think we should just jump right in, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's do it.
So we're friends. We know each other. We
course.
love your work and are familiar with it. We're going to put some links and stuff so that people can see your work as well. So you can check out Harley's work, please, when you get the chance. But to start with, like, how did you get into art? And what was like the first medium for you? Because you do so many different things and you do them all amazingly well. Just childhood, I guess. Like, or whenever that was.
Oh, man.
The beginning.
The beginning.
Begin at the beginning.
Oh, that's too far back. I think, honestly, it sounds crazy, but I was talking to my brother about this, my older brother, and he's 3 years older than me. And we were talking about, he was reminded me when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I used to write these like little raps.
Oh,
Nice.
And this was a long time ago. Let's just say it was like the beginnings of hip hop. Just to not date myself too much, but that's pretty much dating myself. And he was, and I would do these raps, like I would like make, but they were like so rudimentary. It'd be like walking down the street, I was walking to my friend and I was gonna meet, and it was this kind of thing. But in the raps, I would like make little like cartoon kind of images, or like just drawings of the situations that I was rapping about, writing these raps about.
Storyboarding.
Basically storyboarding.
Yeah.
And this was like in Inglewood, and early to mid '80s, and later it was in South Central. But like this was like Inglewood. It was like very, 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 very poor. But I was such an imaginative kid. My poor mom. My mom was a single mother, and she was like from like this little village in Guatemala, and she would always say this thing like, "Oh, mijo," because later on it became such like interested in philosophy and all this shit, like poetry and all this stuff. And I was asking her all these questions constantly, and she just got very. At one point, she was like, "Mijo, I don't know about this philosophy, all this stuff. I'm a simple woman from a simple village. I didn't graduate the 6th grade. She didn't graduate. She was from Guatemala, and like she didn't graduate." And I realized that was later, and I realized it was like this thing of like I've had more energy in it than I think a lot of my friends did. My brother definitely, and people around me, my cousins. I just had this like sort of frenetic kind of thing that needed to kind of constantly be finding an expressive outlet. I don't know. I guess that would be the first. But and I always drew, always painted. I wanted to be a cartoonist as a kid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I wanted to be I always wanted to make film. It was just kind of that thing. That was crazy.
I mean, the rapping's kind of poetic too. It's sort of a form of
Yeah.
poetty in a way.
What do you know what you were listening to at that time?
That's a good question, yeah.
To start rapping.
Yeah.
Well,
Like, was it the radio? Oh,
Yeah. So at that time, it's interesting. It's like it really is a generational thing now. Like, it's crazy because I mean, there's no way around it. It definitely was this generational thing because at that time, I remember I was really into very, like, varying things. Like we listened to a lot of like early punk and like post-punk and new wave, all the new wave stuff, like whatever my older cousins were listening to. And then they were like half Japanese, and we just had like just interesting. But we were also listening to a lot of hip hop, and there was a station. At that time, man, I feel old. But at that time, you could only listen to hip hop or like rap or anything like that in some subversive radio stations. And this is LA. Like this is like, like not far from New York. So like I can only imagine what it's like in other countries. Like it was probably non-existent.
Yeah.
But so you would have to turn to the left of the dial, and sometimes AM radio, and we would my cousins would find it. And they put it on, and this was like, I'm not joking, like, and we'd put it on, and it'd be like, oh shit, this is it, and it'd be like, do you guys know who JJ Fad is?
No.
Okay, so JJ Fad is like JJ Fad, and he the rap. There was an all-girl like rap group.
Oh wow!
And they were from like the early '80s, like really influential. Like,
crazy.
Almost like a cappella. Like a lot of this shit is a cappella.
Oh.
Stuff like that. Obviously, the stuff that was on that was popular, like Run DMC. I remember my cousin had like the cassette and on the boombox, like my Adidas, and it was like Adidas. And it was like the thing, like that was kind of everything. But and then we also listened to like so much. Everything. Like my aunt. It's funny because my grandfather didn't know English, and my aunt didn't know English, but they used to sing a lot of like songs by Willie Nelson and Dolly Parton, and she would do this harmony, which at the time I didn't know that there was an actual harmony, or I didn't know much about music in terms of like knowing that that's what she was actually doing, singing along with the voice, but not on the same note, same register. She was actually singing the harmony. And I was like, wow, this sounds so beautiful. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent, but I think that was kind of like the impetus of the whole thing. I mean, I don't know if that was the reason. I think it was deeper than that, but I do remember that being like some of the first kind of creative things that I would, because we always had friends, me and my brother, but like I was a little bit of a loner. Like I had a bunch of friends, but I was always happy to be alone, and create. And I think now, fast forwarding, it's like that. It's sort of an autonomous activity. Well, it is. Yeah. Painting more than any other thing I've ever done. Like making a film is the most collaborative, as you two know.
Yeah.
And then music it starts autonomous, but it becomes this collaborative thing.
Yeah.
And the same way film is too. Like you start with writing the script or whatever it is, and then you start. You have to. All the elements are out of your hands a little bit. You're like, oh shit. And the same thing with making music. It's like, and that's part of the magic of it. But I think with painting or anything in terms of the art practice, that is, even some of the sculptures that I've sort of played around with, I think that can also be. That's a very autonomous activity. Like you're discovering everything as you're doing it, and so I can trace it back to those moments of being alone in my room, writing these listening to the radio, recording it on cassette, and then playing it back. And I don't know, it's a weird thing because it's like at one point it makes me feel really, really dated, but at the same time it's also I think about the limitations of creativity.
It's magical.
It's insane. Like the only way that we actually make great work is actually first and foremost knowing what it is, what our limitations are. Yeah. And having sort of honing in, like almost having like parochial, sort of like a myopic version of like what it is we want to do. Yeah. Like when you first start making music or anything, you like these are my basic. This is my basic foundation, and you're kind of like, you can dress in all black, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And you have like your shit. And then you get older, and then it just becomes so expansive, and all this stuff that you used to think that you were rallied against, all of a sudden it's like, actually, that's kind of interesting. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then all of a sudden you contain contain multitudes, what women says. It's like, so you start to contradict yourself in the sense of like, but all you're doing is just growing. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I'm wondering, like, was there like a point in time where you were like, I can do this for my life? Like, I can make a living at this. This can be,
Or this is what I want to do.
or this is what I want to do.
This is my purpose.
Yeah. And if
Yeah.
so, like, was one more than the other at the start, and then or was it all of it all the time?
I mean, I feel like those are two different questions in a way. Like what I want to do and whether or not I can make a living doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like those are like, I mean, I think I was really young when I finally realized, this is what I want to do. Like, but
Yeah.
even not like in terms of semantics or lexicon or even like fully understanding like what it means to be like an artist or whatever, like that full but knowing knowing the feeling, the
Yeah.
inherent emotion of like, this is what I want to do with my life,
Yeah.
how I want to spend my life,
Yeah.
but not out of like, oh, this is a choice.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
like I was thinking about William Blake and this thing with William Blake where he goes, you might know this poem. It's like, he who binds to himself a joy does the winged life destroy, but he who kisses it as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. The idea that, if you try to hold on to anything that's beautiful, it's going to destroy you.
Yeah.
But if you kiss it as it comes and goes, your life will be somewhat sublime,
Yeah.
It'll at the very least have some tranquility to it. And that's where I think like a lot of poetry exists, and that why metaphors need to exist in our world. And when you talk about mysticism and all of these other things, these things are really, really vital in our existence, because regardless of where you stand, agnostic, atheist, whatever it is you believe in, you're going to have to meet face to face with a phenomenon, no matter what.
It's true.
And
Yeah.
especially once you lose someone you really love. Like today, what's crazy is today is the death anniversary, not the death anniversary, excuse me, the birthday of my nephew who passed away 2.5 years ago, and he would have been 21 today. And it's crazy because I didn't calculate doing this thing.
Yeah.
I
Right,
wasn't thinking. I wasn't looking at the date or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was really, really heavy today because I was like, man, it was raw. And I talked to my brother and I had to call him eventually. And it was one of those calls where you're like, you got to be this, like,
Yeah.
how you doing? And we're really close. And it was heavy, crying a few times today. But the thing about it is that you start to feel, it's weird. I don't know. You start to feel more alive in a way, the more you honor them as they're
Yeah.
going. And these sort of metaphors for things, whether or not whether you're seeing like we've talked about this before,
Yeah.
you see like a butterfly or you see some things, you start to ascribe meaning to all these things in life. I'm going on a long tangent, sorry.
No, it's true.
No,
It's like
this
these
is,
moments
yeah.
where you just like sit with something, with, I don't know, with pain, or tragedy, with grief, you just, it's true. Like it's a weird paradox that it's those moments you're most connected to kind of everything around you,
Yeah.
like it brings you into the present or something. I think we live a lot of our lives in trying to do something, or where,
Right.
where,
Disconnect.
yeah, it's always just like,
Disconnect from the body.
yeah, disconnect from the body because we're striving for something or we're,
Worrying.
yeah, but it's something about, when you're thinking about the future, you're thinking about, or something like that, you're thinking about the
Yeah.
future or you're thinking about the past or whatever, but you're not in the present where you are.
I think that has a lot to do with like sort of being in a post-consumerist sort of society. Because I think what happens is we've forgotten that we are also part of nature.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
separate ourselves with a roof and all these things, and we're constantly tinned up. But the thing that opens us up to
Post-industrial age, like
Yeah.
like the industrial age, I think just severed us from nature.
Yeah.
The moment we started becoming like cogs in a factory of consumerism, or
But I wondered, like, yeah, that's true, but that's very true. But I wonder how much of that is also just like us being the inability to us actually like for us to actually be to get, it's like we learn, forms of meditation or something like that,
Yeah.
so that we can get ourselves to the present, as you're talking about, like, to not. And how much of that is like our separation from nature, like not real, forgetting full well that we are so, we are so formless in a lot of ways. Like,
Yeah.
I'm as connected
Yeah.
to you, or to you as, or to anything really, as anything else.
Yeah.
Sort of in the overview effect, the overview look,
Yeah.
like we're like, in 100, 200 years, like,
Yeah.
it's like this individuality doesn't really fucking matter,
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
it goes back to like the whole thing with art, because it's like, the greatest thing about making art for a living, and I actually, it's a crazy segue, but it's like, how like you were like,
You're bringing it back.
you were asking the two questions, or the two questions were
Yeah.
kind of presented, where it
Yeah.
was like making work for a living, or doing it for a living, and also when you wanted to do it. I think making it for, like, knowing that I could actually do it for a living, I think had a lot to do with cutting of the cord with my own, again, like, metaphors, my own, like, my own ideas, because as much as I felt definitely sort of a bravery in choosing to do something like this, especially not coming from any semblance of money or
Privilege,
or,
yeah.
nothing, like, very
Yeah.
poor, and also immigrant family who's like, we didn't come here for you to do this, like,
Yeah.
we came here for you to be, come on, like,
Yeah.
like, you're gonna do this.
Yeah.
It's like, it seems so, like, in some ways it seems very selfish, from the outside looking in, from them, and I understand why, but it's also, for me, it was like, I always used to say, like, it's like eating, shitting, sleeping, it's all the bodily functions that we do, all the things. Honestly, there's just nothing else I could have done if I would just be gone insane.
Yeah.
And I don't think, on some capacity, and I think that's just, there was really no choice at
Yeah.
that point. But as far as making a living goes, I think that took kind of a cutting of the cord, maybe only like, that probably only really happened like, because I did a lot of things musically, but I think I was always kind of tied to this sort of idea. And I think it wasn't until like maybe like 5 or 10 years ago that between 5 and 10 years ago, that I was like, you know what? This is who I am. Like Popeye says, I am's who I am. I am. And it's like, and I think eventually you just have to like get to that place, and then try to figure out where, like, and it does take a level of bravery. And I think when it happens later in life to a person, being able to make a living doing this, I think it's so healthy, because you're just like, you've gone through all the ego bullshit, all the, it's like, it's just like, you're so much more grounded. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I don't know, you're not really operating from a place of, I don't know.
You're also a fully developed person. It's like coming into it not fully developed. It's like, you can become really tripped up.
Yeah.
But when you're grounded and you've gotten to that place where you know who you are, it's just different.
Yeah, for sure. It's so different. Yeah.
Join the Night Temple subscription. Exclusive behind the scenes footage. Exclusive Art Share community space. Monthly Zoom Art Share hangout. Art gallery, film showcase and music playlists. Member only free or discount events. Community profile space. Merch and event discounts. Exclusive night tongue music and concerts. Join now.
I was young, I remember like my favorite writers were Camus and Kafka.
Mm-hmm.
And my first painting, funny enough, I talked to my galleries recently about this, was like, did you know my first painting that I ever did, like the first real painting where I was like, I think I could do this.
Yeah.
Like, this sounds crazy. This sounds made up.
Yeah.
I swear it sounds made up, but it's not. It's not. And my gal was just giving me shit. She's like, oh, yeah, of course. And I remember you, and yeah, when you were 13, you read, whatever, blah, blah. And I was like, no, but my first painting, I must have been 15, 16, was of, like, the first real one. Like, I was, like, serious painting, was a painting of Kafka. But it was not Kafka. It was him when he was 13 years old. So I didn't just paint Kafka, but I painted him as a child.
That's so
which is crazy.
nice.
And he's like has this like waterfall. I have to find it. I recently recovered it like a couple years ago in my mom's garage, and I kept it and I have it somewhere archived. But it's crazy because it still means so much to me, and it's not a very big painting. But when I was reading Notes from the Underground and Dostoevsky and things like that, like my life is like it's so varied in this weird way where it's just like like I'm listening to like. I mean, it sounds insane. Like, really, it just sounds fucking crazy. Like, honestly, like, but at the same time, like, Notes from the Underground was so influential in my life where I remember reading that. And you guys remember the book, Notes from the Underground? Notes from the Underground, basically, quick, expeditious, like, synopsis. Guy's paranoid. Very similar to all Dostoevsky's book. Guy's paranoid, he's like, oh my God, everybody's thinking about me, everybody's looking at me, blah, blah, blah. He's like, basically, this is pre-Freud, right?
Yeah.
So he's like anxiety, so on and so forth. He's just basically like thinks everyone's like, and he's just an outsider. It's a very similar thing to Crime and Punishment, where it's like, he shoots the person. It's like this whole thing.
Yeah.
But I remember at one point reading Notes from Underground. I was like 15. I was living in New York. I was like, I gotta get my shit together. Because if not, I'm gonna end up like this fucking way. Because I relate to him way too fucking much. You know what I mean? And that's where like I was like, fuck this. Dostoevsky is like a pre-existential kind of novelist. Like what they call like Kierkegaard and people like that. But like I think, this is the great existential malaise. We sit here and we understand life as it exists. But here we are. When we're met face to face with the great existential malaise, and eventually it's.
Sorry, no. Well, I think that goes back to what you were saying before about nature.
Yeah.
Because is there a great existential malaise if you are connected to nature? Because all life and death serves life and death in nature.
There you go.
And like it's us that have disconnected ourselves from that comprehension.
Well, it's because we have.
And then we have existential malaise because we're fucking disconnected.
Well, also because we have the consciousness of our own death.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's where
we have the consciousness of our own death, but it has no meaning.
All it does is make us worry ourselves to
death.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the thing is, like, death is okay.
Death is more than okay.
It's beautiful.
It's part of life, and it actually is probably one of the most important parts of life.
Yeah.
But I think that, I think that you're right. But I also think that, it's not just that the whole existential philosophy is disconnected from that. Like, it is, but I think that, you can know, we're all connected and we're all part of anything. But we have bodies, and the horror is not going away.
No.
But the thing is, if you know it in your body, it does go away. But that's a glitch. It does. It's
for a minute, for a moment.
For the moment that you are in your body with it.
Well,
but that's the thing. We still exist and we still engage and like.
I felt like I was going to die from COVID, right? Yeah. Like I was pretty much like I'm going to die now, and it did not feel unpleasant. I must say, it felt like peaceful.
Well, okay.
But that's because you were close to death.
But here's the thing.
That's because you were literally close.
So when you're not close to death,
you make friends with
them.
But also
you're worried about paying your rent when you're.
But see, here's the thing. Here's the thing that I would say is like, Andrew makes a really good point, and so do you. I think what happens is becoming friends with death is one of those things. It oscillates. It oscillates, just as you're saying. Like, there could be a moment that you're just so like.
It oscillates.
It really
that's
oscillates.
The thing. It just does.
There's a moment.
I think that's it too.
That's
That's it. Yeah,
it
it's an
oscillates.
oscillation.
And,
Yeah.
like Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen has this amazing. When he was asked about death, he's like, "Are you afraid of death?" And he says, Leonard Cohen, he's one of the great spokesperson for the entire
Yeah.
enterprise of
Yeah.
the thing, because really, like all of a sudden we have a person which I relate to so much, because he's not doing this California kind of like woo thing. He's
Yeah.
just being like, he still puts on his suit. He still understands his own ego. Like
Yeah.
Sebastian Horsley says, our public image is the way we dress is the affectation of our public image.
Yeah.
It's in the same way
Yeah.
that we use our words.
Yeah.
It's that's all it is. It's just
Yeah.
an affectation. It means very little. We're all naked underneath.
Yeah.
And Leonard Cohen understood this. So he like understood like the Buddhism aspect of like what we're all talking about, but also hey, I'm still gonna show up in my shades
Yeah.
and my suit, and I'm not gonna fucking not, you know what I mean? Like, and I think what he said was that, it's not death I'm afraid of, it's the preliminaries.
Yeah.
It's all the peripheries. It's all
Yeah.
the things, like I've seen my aunt die of leukemia, my mom die of pulmonary fibrosis, my stepfather die of lung cancer. I've been with all of them on their last breath.
Yeah.
My nephew when he was on a ventilator before we took him off the ventilator. And being with these people, like, what you understand is that it's not necessarily the dying part. It's the preliminaries. It's the difficulty in that, and anyone who's ever experienced that, and, it's that constant. I remember reading to my mom when she was dying, and I would read her these, like, it wasn't for me, but I would read her these like Bible stories, and I would read it to her like a little, like a child, like reading to my nephews or something, my niece, and I would read to her, and all it was to appease her anxiety.
Yeah.
And here's a woman who had so much faith,
Yeah.
understood exactly where she was going, and yet even then there was these moments that I had to appease her anxieties through these stories, and sometimes she'd be like, "Mijo, another one. It oscillates, like you cannot.
Yeah.
It's like doing DMT. It's like, it's like you do it, or ayahuasca, or any great thing that you do that really gives you, it's going to give you that sense of understanding, that appreciation for death and becoming friends with it, but it isn't always going to be there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm like? It's gonna, like, you're gonna go back to that place because we're all conditioned. We all have like genetic memory. We all have that thing in our ancestral membranes that exists within us that are gonna constantly be there.
Yeah.
And so we have to. It's a constant work. It's like we don't just arrive and, okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
It's like anyway. I can go on and on about it, but I'm not going to.
Nighttime, euphoric bliss state. Elevate your mind, body, and spirit. Wash away all tension and infuse yourself in the ecstatic floral wonder that is nighttime, euphoric bliss state.
You are an expression of nature, like which we all are, and your work is an expression of that. You express yourself in so many different ways. Do you feel like there is an aspect of nature that you, or just themes that you always revisit, whether they're themes from your childhood or like themes that are more like conceptual, like are there, is there that sort of draw for you or expression for you?
I mean, I would say a few things.
Okay.
And I think one of them I know that comes to mind is always grief. It's always like, loss, grief, whether that comes in the form of death or in the form of other things, which we're always experiencing every day, really.
Yeah.
If we really think about it, and loss is such a big and it's an umbrella under so many, it's just an umbrella. Like there's so many things under that umbrella.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing would be, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, grief to me is the main one. But I think the other thing is migration. I think but that's more of a conscious sort of, grief is the thing that just like kind of lives and with everything that I do. But like, not that everything is like sad and like just like
Grief can be really beautiful.
I think it's the most beautiful.
I think it is
Yeah.
the most beautiful too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an equal expression of the heart. You know.
Yeah.
Like, the heart. Yeah.
I think it's
love, you know.
It's love.
Grief is love.
It's
yeah,
love.
exactly.
Grief is love. Yeah.
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 Yeah. No love, no grief.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I did like kind of research on South America, like ancient South America, right? One thing that comes up a lot is this jaguar god.
Yeah.
Now I know there are temples to the jaguar god in Guatemala, right? So were you exposed to that at all? Like,
Well, I've been to a lot. I mean, it's pretty deep for me. So my father wrote a book called Secrets of the Talking Jaguar.
really?
And but
What?
he's my biological father, but I wasn't raised with him. I
Yeah.
didn't know him at all growing up. Like, didn't know him at all. I met him when I was 23.
Mm.
Do you want to know this story?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So my father's a very well-known person.
Yeah.
Like his last name is not Cortez. That's my mom's last name.
Mm.
I mean, it's not important what his last name is. I mean, he's you'll know. But
Yeah.
but I think the thing about that is that I've always found myself very connected to that world very easily.
Mm.
It's not something. It's not something I've ever like looked for or searched for. Like, I don't. Spirituality, mythology, all this stuff doesn't. It's not something that I'm like, ooh, like grasping for, you know. And that's why I think I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can separate it from like the authenticity to what it is. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think it has to do with being raised by my mom
Yeah.
and having that DNA of my father. But anyway, he wrote a book called The Secrets of the Talking Jaguar, and the first time I ever saw that book, I was in New York visiting my brother and his ex-wife at the time, or his wife at the time, and passing by Barnes and Noble, and it was like the bestseller book. And I'm like, she goes, "Hey, isn't this your?" She has this like Queen's accent. She goes, "Harley, isn't this your father?" I was like, "Holy shit, that is my father." I met him when I was 23 at a book signing at the Central Library here in LA. It's crazy. I told you this story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And have I told you the story?
No.
And it was really bananas because my ex-girlfriend at the time, she was like, "You gotta meet him," and I didn't want to. And it was like, the internet existed, but she got it from like a pamphlet or some kind of like brochure or something. She was like, "Okay, you gotta like." Her father died when he was 36. She was 6 of a brain aneurysm, just like suddenly. She's like, "This is not natural. You have to like know your father." Conversation. She was like getting her PhD in something. I was like super young, and I was like, "Man," she convinced me.
Yeah.
And so I go to the library, and the day or two before, Alice Walker and like Carlos Fuentes had like just done a lecture there, which is incredible, which just gives you an idea of like what the caliber of people who are there. And so he's doing a lecture. So we see the lecture, and then we go to the book signing, and the lecture is insane because he does a ritual, and the whole time she's like, "Oh my God, he walks like you." I'd never seen my father in my life. I was like 23. I mean, he saw me when I was like 6 months old. I mean, but I've never seen him in my life. And so we're watching him do this whole ritual. And my father speaks like 8 to 9 different native, like indigenous dialects. He speaks like, he grew up on a reservation. So he grew up speaking Hopi, Pueblo, Navajo, etc. And then he grew up speaking. And then he learned Tzotzil, which is like in Guatemala, and like Cachiquel, Quiche, and Mixtec, Zapotec, etc. Which you can kind of study the etymology of the language. Anyway, see him do this ritual, and he's doing this whole thing, and it's all in the native language, and it was just incredible, and it's really beautiful, you know? You separate yourself from, that's your father doing this thing, to just like, that's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
That he's actually doing for so many people.
Yeah.
So now I'm in the line, waiting to meet my father. And it's at a book signing, you know, so everyone is like, there's all these middle-aged women who are like all holding books. Mostly middle-aged white women, except for Lisa Bonet, who was there.
Wow.
Who was like one of my biggest crushes growing up.
Oh,
and she like
I
leaves,
love
and
it.
everybody's
She's
like,
so gorgeous.
yeah, and everyone's like, she leaves, and I was like, whoa, is that Lisa Bonet? And then I'm with all these women, and every time a new person comes, I have to go to the back of the line. And I'm the only person who doesn't have a book in his hand, or her hand, or whatever. Because it's like I'm also the only person of my age that there, like, and the only person who's not a woman, I think. I mean, there was like a Rastafarian white guy, like a Pastafarian kind of guy. But outside of that, there was no, and it was crazy because I kept having to go to the end of the line, holding this hat, like I had like this handicap hat, but I never wore it. I was just like, and eventually I got to the front of the line and met my father, and he goes, he's like long hair and all this sort of indigenous cowboy kind of clothes. And he goes, I know you. How do I know you? And I go, my name's Harley. He goes, my boy. And then he hugs me, and we just start, tearing up and crying or whatever. And everybody, there's still a little bit of an audience. I
He
managed.
just like recognized you?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, yeah. I mean, we have very similar eyes, Like, it's not like, but, I want to tell this one story, and this is the last anecdote I'm going to say tonight. But I was in Greece 2 years ago. I was fucking devastated by everything. I was just devastated. I was just constantly grieving. I was in Guatemala. I was in Mexico. I was everywhere. But I was finally in Greece. I was on this island in Naxos. And I'd seen Brian Eno at the Acropolis. I went there to see Brian Eno at the Acropolis to I don't know. I just went there to see him. And then I was in Naxos. I was by myself. And I'd finished reading this book by Ocean Vuong called On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which is about his mother passing and his life as a migrant. Again, similar themes. And then finally I was like, you know what? I got to walk. I woke up super early and I was like, I gotta walk this beach. And I'm walking this beach and there's no tourists. I was like, fuck yeah, thank God. And I'm just walking. It's like a little island in Naxos. Now it's a little touristy, but I'm walking. And then I'm walking and I have this Audible on and I'm like listening to whatever Audible is on. And I just press like I'm listening to, and this whole thing is about grief. And I'm grieving my mom's death, my nephew's death, my ex-partner, all this stuff. And then I'm walking like with intent, just with intent on this beach. And I'm looking for a coffee too. I'm like, I gotta find a fucking coffee because, I can't be up after an hour without coffee. And it was already like over an hour. And I was like, but I'm just like, you know what? And it was just so beautiful and it's tepid, like quiet, like the sea, the Mediterranean Sea is just like quiet. And then I'm hearing this guy in my headphones, and he's like, when you go to the ocean, like the greatest place to go for grieving is the ocean. Always go to the ocean. Alcohol, all these other things are what you're going to be called to. The ocean is the greatest thing. You know, that foam, that thing, connecting to the rocks, the language, the way in which the shore speaks to the land. It's just like, it's a language that's been kind of talked to. It's an ancient language. And so I'm listening to this. I'm like, okay, this is exactly what I need to. And eventually it's like, all of a sudden it's like, he says, and if you go to the ocean, don't be around tourists. Which I'm like, okay, I mean, no tourists. It's an early morning. And if you don't eat around the water, don't ever eat at the ocean, because unless you're willing to give it a offering. And I couldn't find my coffee, so I was like, well, I'm not eating around the, you know. So it's like, I was like, holy shit, you know. And then finally, it's like, this is the greatest place you'll ever find for grieving. And finally, I realized it was not only my father's book that I'm listening to, and it's called The Smell of Rain on Dust or something, but it's all based on grieving. It's all based on grief. Not only that it's also his voice. He's narrating it, which I wasn't even. I was just so out of it, you know, like. And it sounds crazy, but it's like for me, like in the morning, until I have coffee, I don't really. Everything's on automatic pilot, you know.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of in that zone. And I was like, oh my God, my father is talking to me. I'm in this remote island in Greece. I'm by myself. My mom has passed. My nephew's passed. All this shit is happening. And now it's like, it's fucking crazy, right? And I see these rocks and I'm like, I'm going to go meditate on these rocks. And I go to the rocks and there's no one around. And the water's just kind of hitting the rocks very softly, very tepid, but in this like meditative way. And then I take the headphones off and I just start to meditate and I start to cry and I feel my mom embrace me and then my nephew and eventually even my own father. And it was this thing that all of a sudden I found myself in this position of like, okay, you're an elder now. You have to accept that you're an elder. You know, at some point, you have to be the elder, you know, and no easier way than for your, you know, the one you love the most to have passed. Because, you know, that's just how I feel about my mom. Like, she's just the one I've always loved the most in the world. And I think it was this crazy thing that had happened where it was so transformative that it never changed. It changed me in such a way that I never, you know. And when you talk about the jaguar thing, that's such a big symbolism in Latin American culture. So when you were talking about it, it was one of those things where I'm like, that is the constant state of being for me. The jaguar is like the most prominent figure for me, not just in how I grew up, but also in culturally, but then now with my father in that relationship. So it's like it's a very deep kind of thing to contemplate. Anyway, sorry I went on a tangent, but like, yeah, that's kind of that just kind of gives you an idea of like a sense of what kind of.
Apologize for that.
Yeah,
This is beautiful. Yeah.
Really beautiful.
Yeah.
yeah.
Important question.
Okay.
It's a simple question.
Right.
Like, what are you working on now? And like, what can, you know, is there something that you're working on now that you're like passionate about, that you're passionate about people seeing or staying tuned for, or, you know?
I don't know. Well, I'm working on a film called Jean, which is a magical realist migrant story, which I'm really proud of. But we're looking for more funding, so I don't know when this is going to come out. By the time it comes out, I hope we find funding. But if not, please.
Get in touch.
I'm exhibiting at the Museum of Modern Art in Mexico City for an organization called Arte Vivo. which I've done last year at the Humex Museum and other places, at the Maya Museum. I don't know if you're familiar with Mexico City in that regard, but I have a great relationship with them. So that's a big thing for me. Tomorrow I have a show opening up, a group show at my gallery in New York.
Nice.
The George Burgess Gallery. And that's in Soho. I have been working on. I'm releasing a book. I'm releasing an album, the third volume of an instrumental series that I've been doing, and that's next month in September, called An Inventory of Memory, Volume 3. And then there's a book that I'm putting out. It's just like a poetry. I don't know. I got all kinds of shit going on, you know. But the book isn't
A
like
poetry book. That's great.
yeah. So yeah, it's a poetry and short story book. With the same name, Inventory of Memory. And then I have a solo exhibition in Mexico City in November. I don't know. It just sounds like I'm just like blah 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 blah. I can't.
Well,
You know,
I mean,
I don't know.
I
What
think-
was it? What were you asking me? What was the question?
I mean, you know, what are you working
Was I
on
just
now?
starting-
Like, I mean, that's
What am I working? Oh,
yeah.
I'm working on these series of migratory, sort of large-scale pieces that I really want to have a show based around them. But they're incredible. Like, I mean, for me personally, but like, and I'm also doing like this, like sculpture work that it's like using repurposed, found forged materials. That kind of gives a narrative around, you know, where I exist. So in a lot of conversations that we've had,
Yeah.
yeah, that should have been the better answer.
No, that's
Where do
really
you work on those the sculpture stuff? Like we've visited your studio. Do you do it at your studio?
In my studio, but I've been forging a lot of this stuff at Elysian, like or like on
right.
different hikes,
Mm.
mostly in Elysian.
Yeah.
Have you ever hiked Elysian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Many times.
Yeah.
And I go off with like my dog, you know, I go off the beaten path,
Yeah.
looking for like things. So the base of the sculptures would be like trunks of like trees or things like that, and or so it's a lot of forged materials that I go on. So it's kind of nice because I can go on a hike. And I'm doing that simultaneously, and like I'm like I
Yeah.
feel like I'm killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
For my dog, for me, and for my art. Where I'm like, oh no, this is like part of my art. Like, and then I'm like looking for shit, and then once in a while I'll run into someone who like knows me. I'm like, the fuck are you doing? I'm in the bushes and shit. I'm like, hey, how's it going? Like, I'm just like, you know, just kind of like looking for shit. I'm like, and then I'm like walking back to my car with all this shit. You know, like I'm gonna take this to my studio and that's kind of whether I use it or not, I don't know. But like it's like that's kind of been my process for that sort of thing.
Cool.
Well, I have like one final question,
Okay.
which is you talked about like immigration, you know, and that, you know, that's a big thing. You like consciously and like grief, immigration. I'm wondering, what is hope for you?
You know, I don't think anyone ever reaches home.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think home is home is a state of being mentally, but like and emotionally. But I don't think we ever reach home. I think we're a migrational species. I think every species is, but I think, you know,
Like humans.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think that's the fallacy of this idea of borders. That's
Yeah.
why I think it's such a fallacy, because it's like, if you look at history in its most innate way, like it is so migratory.
Mm.
Like, I mean, you just told me about your story, you told me about yours, I can tell you about mine.
Mm.
It's fucking endless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is only in the last,
Couple hundred years. Like,
yeah, 100 years.
Yeah.
So, home for me, physically, I love LA.
Yeah.
I love New York. I mean, I really love LA. At certain pockets, like I know LA. Like no one knows LA, but it still doesn't feel like 100% home. Like as much as it will always be home to some degree, I think there's home everywhere. Like, I always ask people this question of like, what is the landscape, the climate that you love the most? And everyone, all my friends have different answers. Like, oh, I love the mountains, all this shit. And I'm like, well, I love the Mediterranean. And I know that's like a very, it seems like such a like, I just want an easy fucking life. You know what I mean? Like, weather very rarely changes. Basically like LA. Like, it's just like, just give me fucking little change. Like, but the reality is like, it really is that thing. Like, I really do think that is a climate that speaks to me. Like when I'm in the sea, Mediterranean Sea, and you're floating, there's a healing that comes to my body. And with all the grief that I've been through, that has been one of the most healing things to me. And it's a weird thing because I'm indigenous. Like my family's from, like I'm 30% Mayan, like I'm 10% African. Like my family is not necessarily like going like, hey, go to the Mediterranean and fucking like, but there is a quality to that, that feels very, I don't know, one with God, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think that's like the climate that I feel the most drawn to, and the thing that draws me back constantly. I don't know if that's the question, but
Yeah.
definitely.
And the rest of it is just a state of mind.
Yeah, it's all just a state of mind, and that's it. Like it's like where do you live,
Yeah.
and in stories you tell yourself,
Yeah.
because it's all stories.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
Yeah.
even what our body tells us, it's just all stories.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't know.
And temporary.
It's all
Always
it's
temporary.
it's ephemeral.
Thank you very much, Harley Cortez. This has been the first podcast of the Night Temple.
Night Temple.
Um,
Us again.
Join us again. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harley. Thank you, Harley. Thanks.
Lots of love.
into